So no, it's. I just wanted to say thank you, and it's a real pleasure to be here, and it's a real pleasure to give this keynote. And I wish I could have logged in earlier, but I am visiting my grandmother, and that I haven't seen for a very long time, and there are many ways where we can follow people, right? You can follow them on Instagram, on social medias. You know what they're doing. They're sharing pictures and ideas of what they're doing, which is something that we're going to talk about. But then there's also people that may not be as comfortable with the social media. And for instance, my grandmother, she's not on Twitter. She's 92. So the way that she has followed this journey that I've been on has actually been on a map. She have rolled out the atlas, and every week she called me to hear exactly where we were, how many kilometers we have walked, and then she marked it on a paper, on the map, so she knew where we were. So that's another way where we can connect with people in a more connected way, to share our thoughts and world around us. So it's been really wonderful to visit her. But let's start with this presentation, the leaping into the world of science communication. And this is sort of a personal story for me. And I think we'll all enter science communication in our own way. This is how I did it. So let's see, next slide. So this is me, right there as a kid. Yeah, looking young and bright. And when I was a kid, my grandmother wanted, or was sure, that I was going to grow up to be an actor, because I was always making fun and games. And my dad, he was sure I would be a stonemason and build houses. And I was pretty sure I was going to do something with fashion, because there was lots of glitter and glitz, and I love glitter and glitz. But, you know, when it came time to choose my education, I didn't choose any of those. I chose biochemistry. And I haven't looked back, but it's one of the first choices that I made with my mind, not my heart. In my heart, I wanted to be an art historian, because I loved pictures and how things are looking. But I thought that it would be smarter to study biochemistry. So that's what I did. And I was not a very excelled in my master's studies. I wasn't a good student, so to say. I enjoyed the people that was there. We had a lot of fun. We did a lot of good stuff, but it wasn't really, I wasn't really into biochemistry. It wasn't really until I was starting to do a PhD that I really found my spot. Doing research was so much fun. It was really about asking questions, finding questions that was interesting to ask, and finding the answer using science and papers and talking with people. And that was sort of the first time I went like, this is fun. But then I did my second mistake, if choosing biochemistry was my first mistake. And that was that after my PhD, instead of doing what my heart told me, which was go and explore the world, I had become a very loyal and reliant person, and I wanted people to feel that they could rely on me. So when my supervisor said that I could stay and she would like that, I stayed. And then I forgot to ask, what did my heart want? I did was expected of me. And I think that's something we'll come back to through this entire talk. Doing what the heart wants, not always the mind. So after 6 years, I had hit a wall. I had done the teaching, I had done the research, I'd done a lot of things, but I had also run out of money, and I had forgotten why I was doing it. So here I am sitting, happy and go lucky, and not realizing that I am about to head into a giant wall. So there I was, unemployed, sitting exhausted on the couch at home, and trying to figure out what was my next step. And I remember one morning coming down and telling my husband, Christopher, that, if I couldn't do it anymore. I had to do something. And because I was falling apart. I was falling apart trying to grasp a future that I didn't know what was going to be. So I was sitting there and I was just going like, we have to do something. And he was like, okay, what? And I was like, we're going to go for a walk. And he said, okay, where to? And I went like, I don't know. And then he said, well, how about we go up to the northern part of Sweden? And I said, northern part of Sweden, that seems far away. I liked far away. So I said, yes. And that was it. That was sort of where the journey started for both a great adventure that has really allowed me to find out who I am, but also really leap into this science communication. So I would say that that sometimes it's when there is no energy left, and our last sort of like spark will always tell us the direction that we should go, because it's made from the heart and without passion. So that was the beginning. So that was a plan. We were going to walk 3,500 kilometers. It ended up being 3,000 because there were days where it was cold and we stayed in the tent, and then we skipped a few little areas where we didn't go all the way out to the coast. We went a little inland, but still 3,000 kilometers in 4.5 months. And the thing was, how do you make an adventure like this into something that can also be used for your CV? And that was sort of the start of it. How do you do that? And then I spent some weeks thinking. From we got the idea until we left was about 3 weeks. And for those 3 weeks, I was thinking, what do I want to do with these 3 weeks? What can I make it into something that is not just something I want, something that matters to my CV, but also something that is interesting for me, myself. And that's when I came up with this idea, because I love talking with scientists about their science. I love to figure out what they're doing. Why is it interesting, and how did they end up there? So I was like, that's a great idea. I'm going to walk and talk with scientists. And so that was sort of how it started. And as you notice, there was very little pre-planning going into this. This was just an act of passion right there and then. And there is a thing about when we do things based in passion, it's that we rarely regret them, which I'll come back to. And I'm now going to show you, and it's going to be toe curling, so I don't know how long you'll be able to watch, my first walk and talk with myself. And here it is. I'm not going to play much. Test 2. It's just been a few minutes, and I'm thinking, why not optimize this experience of walking and talking? Still raining, still wet, still people coming towards me, which is something I guess I have to get used to. And yeah, that's what you get to see. This is not even my first try. I couldn't share the first try with you. This is the second try. And what you will notice here is you can hear all weather behind and around me. The sound, and it's like shaking up all over the place, and it's not smooth. So you go, because I thought, I got a phone and I'm gonna have a selfie stick, I am good to go. But you're not actually good to go, because that does not look like the good videos on YouTube. So I ended up just checking out a lot of YouTube channels on what is, on what you need to find a good setup. And at the same time, and this was like in a 3-week time, so I couldn't, it was like, go with something that you have access to. So it's like Amazon, Craigslist, find used stuff, and sort of just test it as you go. So this is what I came up with, and also like building a relationship with it, learning to use it, and setting up your accounts and finding out like what sort of are you going to have on this place. So this is what I ended up with. I ended up with a small GoPro because we're going to walk, so it was going to be out in the weather. And I ended up with a like 3-in-1 sort of stick that could sort of have an angle. I ended up with an extra battery, and I think one of the most important things is that I got a real microphone with one of the little fuzzy tails on to reduce it. And you know, that's sort of how it started. Like you just you test things, and you have to find. You can't do it with just your phone. You can to some extent, but you need more if you want it to look good. And this was just the beginning. And I don't think that necessarily the videos that I have produced are very high quality. You could really use much better quality. And one of the greatest things that you really need also your editing. So I sort of just leapt into it. And I think that one of the biggest things that made a difference really was the microphone. So that's something you have to think about if you're going to leap into it, a good microphone. Because sound is important. Whether you do podcasting or you do videos, you need the sound. And then, of course, starting all your accounts, which is also can be a very big time consumer, but can be interesting. And then we were off walking. And this was sort of very much learning by doing, which is, well, to some extent we're used to it in science, but we normally have some sort of, protocol that we can follow. And here I jumped into it, and I learned a lot. One of the things that I learned is height difference. I talked with Lonnie Bissaskon. We had to sit down because he's 2 meters tall. So we couldn't have a walk and talk because my head wouldn't be in the same frame. So it's like little practical things like that. Are you able to actually be in the same frame or not? Should you stand up, sit down? What about the background? What about the lighting? What about the walking speed? My first walk and talk was a power walker Carl Magnus and I had, which is my normal walking speed. But you see the background was just jumping all over the place and everything. So you need to think about some different things, not just getting the equipment, but you also have to think about the setup. And you have to think about the lighting, because going dark and light is just your eyes focusing on the background, not on what you see. I had to find an editing and find a profile. But what I also learned was that I love science. And that was really one of the most important things that I got out of this this project, was that we are able to truly appreciate science when we allow us to talk about it, share science with people. And that, I think, was my main winning of this one. And this, of course, allowed me to talk with, I think, almost 30 researchers from all over Sweden, and from history to astrophysics and everything in between. And the thing that you will learn is, of course, interview skills. When you look at yourself after, realize, say this phrase a lot, then you have to remind yourself, yes, don't say that phrase again, because it is, you have to sound professional, but you also have to, vary your language a little. So that was something that I learned. And it was not until I actually, I talked with Katrin Johansson, who's a professor of communication at the Mid-Sweden University. And I thought at this point I had this pretty much under control. And then she sort of was starting to talk about how we communicate and what people hear when we communicate, because it's rarely the same. What I say, not always what you hear. So we start to talk about how do we communicate. And you have to think about, one, who am I communicating with? Why am I communicating it? Am I using the right tools, the right media, the right language? Is there a platform that I need to use or not? And I had not thought about all of this, and I had just leapt into it. So if you're going to leap into it, ask yourself a few questions before. Ask yourself, who am I communicating with? Am I communicating just with myself? Am I communicating with teenagers, or am I doing it specifically to scientists, young scientists? Am I doing it to children, or am I doing it to elder people, or who am I communicating it with? I think that is something that I had forgotten, but that I think is important that we do if we're going to do science. So I had an amazing trip. I walked all of these kilometers. I met amazing people, not just scientists, but also just people on the road. And I think that taking a break, finding yourself, and using an opportunity to shape your CV, to test new ideas, such as science communication, whether it's just on Twitter, or it's a podcast, or it is a vlog, or it's on YouTube. It's actually quite inexpensive to start and do, and it will give you a whole lot back, because that you realize what you're able to do. So if we were to look at, from this thing, it is that we have to choose whether it's science communication or it's our careers or what we do. Then more often than not, we won't regret if we choose with our passion and with our hearts more than the brain, because the brain will always tell you what is reasonable and practical, but not always what is your passion. And also that sometimes we put ourselves in ideas and of comfort that it should be like this or it should be like that. But really, if we rip that bandage off, we don't know what's underneath it. And the potential is that it could be the true beauty of life. And that we should sometimes treat ourselves to a challenge. Take ourselves out of that little comfort zone that we build around us, and give ourselves that challenge to grow. And that is one thing that I have learned as well. If we don't enjoy the journey, we'll actually never reach the goal, because we will end up hitting a wall before we get there. So if we enjoy it, we'll get there. And also, how do we communicate? And there are many ways to tell our stories, like the way that I have talked with my grandmother about this story that I have, or how I have talked with people on Twitter, or the people that are interested in YouTube, or how I talk with scientists about it. But also someone who's honest enough to tell you if you're boring. I didn't ever video for welcome to my channel. It's gray, brown, and I talk like this. This is my channel. I'm gonna tell you something. And Christopher, my husband, he was like, I love you, and I don't want to watch it. You should be you. You should be who you are. And that's how the second one came along. So if you go into my welcome page on YouTube, you will see that it is not boring anymore. And I think that we need people around us that will tell us, hey, I know that you're doing something, but rethink it. Think that honesty sometimes is good, because as scientists, we sometimes forget to have emotions in our communication. We hide the facts and the figures, and then we forget to talk about why we're doing things, why we have passion to do it. And I think that's something that we should remember. So always have someone who's honest on board. And I think that was the end. And then I was gonna, if you have any questions of like more practical thing, please let me know, and I will try and answer them.
Wow, this is awesome. You inspired me and inspired all of us. Great, and really great. Thank you so much, Dr. Ulrikke, for your time and your effort and this beneficial content. We were happy to be with you at this talk. Thank you so much, and it's my pleasure to introduce you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. It was my pleasure to do it. And again, any questions, if you have them now, fine. Otherwise, just send me a message. I'm on YouTube. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook, and I have my website. So just check it out and contact me. I'll be happy to give feedback and help. And I think one of the most important things that we can do as scientists is to not be afraid of tell our story, our passion to why we're doing what we're doing. Because then all of a sudden it makes sense to people that we are talking with, and they can relate to us much better. I think that is...
I think we have a question. Someone like you, someone asked, what is the several ways to tell a story?
So, for instance, you can tell a story. It depends on who your audience is. So, for instance, you can tell a story. I could have told this story as, hello, my name is Ulrikke. I'm a PhD. I have done so-and-so. I have now done a journey, and I interviewed these people. This was the questions I asked these people because I wanted to know this. That's one way of telling a story. I can also tell it like I did, where I tell you sort of from a more human perspective, what sort of drove me into it. So there are many ways to tell, in the same way as there's many ways of use imagery. You can use sort of, like what I really like the bioscience, like when you do these head ups, they're always very eye-catchy and colorful, and you use yellow and sort of like it's very young and energetic, whereas other people could have shown the same picture in a very dull and gray thing, and the content would have been the same. It's just how it was told and how we as receivers we interpretate it, and that's part of the communication part of it. We interpretate what other people are telling us, and it's not always that is one-to-one, and I think that is that is the different ways of telling a story. Like telling a story about my grandmother, that made you feel like, oh, she talked with her grandmother every month or every week about where she was and everything, and that's another way of you connecting with me, so you know me. Yeah, any more?
Yes, there is another question. Asma asks you, either your passion was enough to overcome the obstacles that faced you?
Yeah, it's hard to know. I think it comes down to when you are at the edge of yourself, when you are really at the edge of who you are and the image you have of yourself, then there is a core of you that will fight and tell you where to go, direction. And I think that was what sort of, for me, overcame where I was on a couch, falling apart, to really grasping life and getting all the things that I love out of it. So I think we can overcome a lot, but I think we just sometimes have to get out of our way, or out of our heads, I would rather say. And then I think that if you are interested in science communication, I think you should ask yourself a few questions. I think you should ask yourself, who do I want to communicate with, and what do I want to communicate? Is it science? Is it something else? And what is the best media to reach people? It's not always that YouTube will be the best to reach people. For instance, if you don't like the way you look in front of a video, that's something that took me a long time to get used to, how I actually look. Then maybe video isn't for you, because then you're more like focused on how you look. If you don't like the way you sound, your voice, or you don't feel comfortable talking, then maybe you should do popular scientific writing. So it's also about finding where you sort of fit in, where you feel comfortable exploring science communication, because it can be done in so many ways.
Great. We have the last question. How to avoid the pseudo-passion?
Pardon? There was that sound. To avoid what?
Pseudo-passion. How to avoid pseudo-passion?
Yeah. How to avoid what? There's a lot of sound coming from outside.
How to deal with the temporary passion? Temporary passion.
The pseudo passion. Yeah, how to do that? But I think that tells us something about who we are, isn't it? If we are persons who love to shop around in our passions, then maybe we are more general in our views. Where if we are so focused on one thing that we don't really care about the rest of what's happening, we're very passionate about this one thing, then it's a different path that we should be taking. I think having, whether we call them pseudo passions or temporary passions, that is more something that we should take and look at as a learning tool for ourselves. Because that if we go, oh, look at this, look at that, it says, hey, I'm a generalist. I shop around, I can be part of many things. I'm not a specialist in one thing. And that can tell us a direction, whether in career or in our lives. Yes, also, I started up way too many social channels, and it takes a long time to sort of keep them up, and I almost ran into a wall doing it, because I wanted to do special things for different channels of communicating. I think one of the things that you should do is to choose 2, max 3 channels that you focus on, that you put effort into, and then make them the right one. Twitter can do one thing that Instagram can't, and the same with Facebook and YouTube and LinkedIn, all for different networks and ways of communicating with people. So you should take down, and again, it comes back to who do you communicate with? And that will determine who or how you should choose your social channels. Whether it's TikTok or anything else, Jiffy or what do I know. There are many ways where you can reach people, but you have to know who you want to reach, because different people use different channels. So, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Ulrikke.
My pleasure. And I'll probably be around later today or tomorrow, so just hit me up in the chat. So yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
See you guys.
بعد الفترة العظيمة دي. Okay.
Bye.
باي. بعد التوك العظيمة دي أعتقد الناس كلها يعني قدرت إزاي تعرف إزاي يعني تفولو their passion بقى وتعرف